Hello and welcome to the second edition of the Tigers Down Under. We're the official Hull City Australia podcast, and I'm joined once again by Mitch,
Hey everyone.
and I'm joined for the first time by Logan.
Howdy.
So Logan, I just wanted to start with you because we didn't have you on last time, and I wanted to get your thoughts on the season so far.
Mate, it's been I guess there can't be any complaints so far, or there can be, but probably indifferent. When we started off, I guess at the beginning of the year, there was an expectation. We're probably quietly confident that we would definitely make the six. But I guess as the season progressed, we kind of expected that we wouldn't accept anything short of automatic. And after the last few weeks, it almost seems like we're wrestling with that. Do we take a top six berth, or is the automatic still on the table?
Well, I wanted to ask you, do you reckon, I mean, there's been a bit of movement in the top six lately, especially because we haven't been playing championship games the last week or so with the FA Cup games against Arsenal. Do you reckon we'll still get the automatic spots, or will we have to settle for the playoffs?
I still think that we're a very good chance of sneaking in there. I don't think that Borough every kind of opportunity, every opportunity you expect them to break clear, they don't seem to take it. And likewise, every chance we've had to kind of pull away, we haven't taken it either. So I think it's just a trippy match at the moment, and I'm confident that we'll sneak in to be that second spot.
And I also wanted to get your thoughts on, especially with regards to the new signings, but I guess the squad in general. Who your favourite player of the season's been so far?
It pains me to say it, but in the last couple of weeks, I've kind of gone a little bit off Sam Clucas with his finishing. But up until probably about 3 weeks ago, for me, he was the star man.
I'll tell you what, we put a jinx on him with this podcast, I think, because I think Mitch's player of the season last time we recorded was Sam Clucas, because he'd had 5 goals for the season and was looking so good. But you're right, he seems to have gone off. I mean, most of the players seem to have gone off the boil, really. And I think we'll get into the reviews now. And since we last recorded, I mean, when we last recorded, we'd just gone through an undefeated January, and we'd had a loss to Burnley, but we'd been looking pretty good. But it hasn't gone to plan too much since then. And we'll start with the Brighton game, which was right after we recorded the last one, which was a 0-0 game. It was sort of the first of 2 really challenging home fixtures, the other one being Sheffield Wednesday, so I suppose we can chat about both of them together. But they were both 0-0s, and both teams kind of came to the KC and parked the bus. Mitch, how did you kind of see these games, and do you think it's kind of a concern going forward that we can't break these sides down?
Yeah, well, obviously not being able to score has killed us since we last recorded. I think we only had a couple of shots, maybe even one on target against Brighton, so that was pretty bad. Yeah, but we've got to. I guess you've got to beat the best to be the best, and we're not getting 3 points at home against. And although these teams are good, we really want 3 points every time. So I think we did miss out a little bit. And even though like a draw is okay against these teams, I don't think it's good enough to be winning the championship.
And how about you, Logan? I mean, especially with the Sheffield Wednesday game, I know we watched it together at Cheers. It was a bit of an interesting game because we really looked the dominant team for large patches of it, and Wednesday really came at us in the first half, but then kind of settled for a point in the second half almost. Forestieri got sent off with a red card, so what were your thoughts on the game?
Definitely. I think we definitely wasted the opportunity to take all 3 points, and we should have done. You did mention Forestieri hitting the post earlier on in the game. And I felt that was by far and away their best chance. And after that, I just didn't really have that fear factor when they came forward.
Yeah.
It almost looked that we were certain to score. The Clucas hitting the post too. I actually really liked that change late in the game for him to go move into the central position, because I thought that he offered something that we probably haven't seen too much, particularly when Diami starts to get tired.
It was quite interesting because, I mean, we talk about the fact we couldn't really break down these sorts of sides, but there was that chance between Clucas and I think it was Robertson where they played that really nice 1-2, which kind of put Clucas through. And yeah, if he'd shot a bit better, then he would have, given us the lead in that game and probably won us the match. His shooting has been off a bit, and we had the loss to Birmingham where not only Clucas but the whole team had issues with their shooting, and it's clearly been a common theme over the last 3 or 4 games. I mean, even if you want to include the cup games against Arsenal, we've only scored the 1 goal against Ipswich, which we'll chat about in a second. But the Birmingham loss was probably a bit concerning. The nature of their goal wasn't too bad, I suppose, because it was a deflected shot. But Mitch, how did you see it?
I know it's away from home, but still 3 points. I think they just went and lost to Blackburn yesterday or something like that. So it shows that we really should have got all 3 points there. So to not even come away with one was extremely disappointing.
And what were your thoughts, Logan?
Alex, you mentioned before about sometimes when teams sit behind, we struggle to break them down. I think the disappointing thing was Birmingham had a real crack at us. And if we're ever looking for an opportunity to score a few, I feel like we play our best football when teams have a go at us and we can get them on the counter as well. But Birmingham, to be fair, I thought Birmingham had a real shot and they rightly deserved for their goal. But on another night, it could have easily been 4-1.
Well, it was interesting. I mean, we had 6 shots on target for the game, and we clearly looked quite good going forward. And I've seen like a few other people's thoughts on the game have kind of said we looked the only side really that could have won the game, and yet we lost it somehow because we were doing all of the attacking. But that fortunate deflection for Birmingham kind of sealed the fate in a way. And I guess that's the concern and the common theme I wanted to chat to you guys about, which was that when we go behind, we don't really look like getting back in the game. I think we've come from behind once, and that was against, I think, Reading, I think it was. But apart from that, when we go one down away from home especially, we just don't really get back into games. So is this kind of a concerning sign for the rest of the season? Start with Mitch.
I think it is. I think when we go behind, I think that's when Steve Bruce really has to step up and show his managerial strengths. For example, I think against Bristol when we went 1-0 down, and he brought on Maloney, and Maloney he scored the goal obviously to equalise, but he looked really good, and he brought us back into the game with everything. So, and I think tactically he's not been very strong with some of his substitutions of late, so that could be a reason why.
Yeah,
but
we'll chat about the Arsenal game this morning in a little bit. It was one prime example. I mean, Logan, you've been a big supporter of Bruce for a while. So what's your take on basically his tactics away from home, I suppose?
Away from home, sometimes he does go out, and it does seem at times negative. One thing that you always get with Steve Bruce teams is, with the exception of the cup games in recent. You will always be solid defensively, and I think it only takes one look at the table to see how for and against that. I guess our insufficient with goal tally seems to be cancelled out by how strong our defence is.
I think we've actually got the same. We've got the same goal difference as Burnley, I think, which is your point. I mean, we don't have as many goals for as them, but we've conceded so many less.
Yeah. So you will often complain about the lack of goals being scored, but at the same time, if we're keeping them out at the other end, I think there'd be perhaps a few Fulham fans that would be begging to swap with us. So I think we have to be kind of grateful for what we have in Bruce.
Is it Fulham? I was looking down the other end of the table, actually. I think, is it Fulham or Bolton or someone who's conceded 60 goals, which is 3 times as many as us. So it does put into context how amazing our record is.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, but I know that between McCormack and Moussa Dembele, they have an incredible goals for tally, and their defence is just horrific.
Well, we'll move on to some of the more positive results we've experienced since the last podcast, and I'll start with the Arsenal 0-0, which I saw with you, Mitch, where obviously Jakupovic was the star of the show with 11 saves. How did you see the game?
Oh, what a man! He's the best keeper I think I've ever laid eyes on, to be honest. Well, away from home, obviously it's going to be tough again, and the Emirates is no easy task ever. But I think it was a win for us, even though obviously it wasn't a win. But to go 0-0 away from home and to absorb so much pressure and to not concede a goal after all that, and it was Jakupovic, but our central defenders as well were awesome. So, and I know we were getting behind every save that he made, and it was good because obviously it comes under a lot of adversity and stuff. But to step up and play something like that against Arsenal was awesome. So, yeah, good result.
First clean sheet against them in over 100 years, which is pretty remarkable when you think about it, because you think of all the other big clubs that we've faced, and we've had clean sheets against all of them in the Premier League now. But Arsenal was just, I don't know what it is about them. But Logan, with that draw, we had the issue of the fixture congestion, which obviously has now been relieved as of this morning. And Bruce has spoken quite a bit about his annoyance about fixture congestion. Do you read into that? Do you think it's going to be it's going to have an issue on our title hopes or automatic promotion hopes as the season rolls by?
I definitely see it as a concern. You'd much rather points on the board than games in hand, and I think that Burnley would be very impressed with where they sit at the moment. Looking back down the ladder and seeing that the gap that they've opened up now, and the pressure really is on us now to get these results in the next 2 or 3 games. I think that if Rotherham had not have upset Borough this morning, we could have been in all sorts of trouble with that issue.
Do you? I mean, there's two sides to it, because I actually find it quite interesting to think. When we were sitting first in the table, whether there was an issue that complacency might have come into it, and that being in first place, with Borough having games in hand over us, so kind of the reverse situation, we kind of got a bit complacent where we thought, oh well, so Borough have gone out and dropped points to Leeds, we don't have to beat Brighton now, for instance. Do you think now that we have to play catch up, there's more pressure on the players, they might actually, so to speak, pull their fingers out and actually get the job done?
I think to a degree, but I think the concerning thing is this slight form slump. I mean, if we were to pick up a result, if we had picked up that Birmingham result and had a little bit of momentum to speak of, you probably wouldn't worry about the backlog of games, because we're heading into it with momentum. But the concerning thing for me is that it would, in many ways, going out and losing the game against Arsenal this morning in the fashion that we did. It may feel like it's been a while since we've scored, which we spoke about, the goal drought, and that is probably not what you want heading into such a run like we've got coming up.
Yeah, well, the only game where we did get a goal was the Ipswich result, which was a very impressive result when you consider it, because Ipswich hadn't lost at home in about 16 Tuesday night fixtures, which is a bit of a ridiculous one. It gets to that point and you think it's beyond just a statistical anomaly and there's something to it, so I don't know what it is, but it was a impressive run from them that we've ended, and they didn't even have a shot on target. So is that maybe the blueprint to success away from home, the way we set up perhaps, or I don't know what it was about the performance, but how did you guys see that one? Start with Mitch.
Yeah, well, we talked about it in the previous podcast, and I said I'd want 3 points, but 1 point would away from home to Ipswich, who you said the Tuesday night stat. So to take all 3 was awesome. Who scored? Was it Diame?
It was Diame,
who scored?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Was that televised, that one?
No, I don't think it was televised. I mean, I remember I saw the goal on Twitter as the highlight, but I guess, yeah, it's a bit hard to figure out what went right in that game when we can't watch the game, I suppose.
Yeah. So I don't know exactly how we played, but a win's a win, I suppose, especially away from home, and yeah.
Logan, did you have any thoughts on this one?
Again, I heard it was quite contentious. I believe that Ipswich apparently should have lost a man earlier on in the piece, and then it almost subsequently was.
Actually, I did hear that. Yeah.
It was almost that player. I believe it was one of their defenders that had a shot right near the end of the game that could have nicked a point for them in the death. So we're talking about 3 points gained, and it certainly was, but quite nearly could have been a pretty disappointing night.
And I think I remember. I think it was Bruce chatting about that in the post game, and he actually mentioned that guy got a yellow card late on in the game as well. So he took out Hernandez early in the game, which is I think the incident you're talking about, where he could have seen red and didn't even get a yellow, and then got a yellow card later in the game. So very lucky to stay on the pitch.
Yeah, indeed.
There is a game from this morning that we need to chat about, and it was one of the worst performances.
We have to.
Well, we can make it brief, but I did want to vent my spleen a little bit, because having gotten up at 5 a.m. to get into the city to watch this one, I was not too impressed, and it started with Odebajo named at left back, which I just cannot for the life of me fathom. If you've got Josh Tyman and Andy Robertson sat on the bench, what is the point of starting Odebajo at left back? In what scenario is Tyman going to come on, firstly? Because we got thrashed and he didn't come on. And secondly, and he put Robertson on, in fact. So was Tyman there to sort of come on if we were up 3 or 4-0, which of course is never going to happen? Someone like a Snodgrass on the bench is a much better option as a potential game changer. And Mitch, you were saying earlier about Bruce's substitutions. I think this game kind of just summarised them, didn't it? Because, I mean, you've got Diamande being subbed off up with about 75 minutes gone for Ryan Taylor, of all players. When you think, if you wanted to rest one of our, first 11 players, because Bruce complains about this fixture congestion that we have, and yet he gives Diami 90 minutes. I mean, if you want to rest our first 11 players, you take Diami off for Ryan Taylor, which is almost a like for like, but instead takes off Diamande, who doesn't even get on the bench half the time.
Yeah.
Did you guys both watch this game, didn't you? So I mean, I don't want to hog the mic too much, but how did you guys see this one? Start with Logan.
I've been an avid Bruce fan for a long time, Alex, and I know we've had some heated discussions about the appointment and the continued appointment. This one was baffling for me. I'll have to say hold my hands up and say I actually have no idea what he was thinking, other than the fact that he wanted to essentially throw the game because he's identified the league congestion, and that's the only defence I can come up.
And is that really a good defence? Because I just can't fathom for the life of me having a manager that wants us to lose games. I don't care what the competition is. If he's playing our second 11 week in, week out in it, I don't really see how it affects the league. We'll go out to win games.
The substitutions that you spoke of, and obviously the starting lineup was slightly puzzling, but I think if we had nicked a goal perhaps in the earlier stages of the game, I think we might have seen a different. The bench was quite strong, and I think we might have seen a different tactical display, which is the only defence I would possibly come for. But yeah, I was puzzled. I was totally puzzled. 2
left backs on the bench just seems weird to me. If you're then going to start a right back as your left back, but anyway, Mitch, what were your thoughts on it? Maybe we'll focus on David Myler's performance, and I'll get Logan's thoughts afterwards. But how did you see Myler's game and obviously his part in the first goal?
Well, I kind of expected it to be kind of like a low-scoring game, and maybe we nick one at the end or something like that with a substitute. But when Myler assisted Giroud, then I think once they were on the scoreboard...
The best assist I've ever seen from Myler. Lovely outside of the foot, curling assist.
What was he thinking? Like, what? I don't understand why he did that.
I don't know. I think his defense is probably going to be he hasn't had much sleep because of his newborn baby, but I don't know what was going through his head.
No, I have no idea. And then I think once they scored that, then we'll just chasing the game. And I know it was 4-0 in the end, but I think it could have been a very different story had that not been a goal.
And I'll put it to you guys, I mean, it was also the style of play that struck me, that we sat so deep at home, where we've had so much success this season. I mean, before this game, I think the stat is we've only conceded something like 6 or 7 goals at home, and only lost 1 match. So, and that includes 2 Premier League opponents. So it's not as if we have a poor record at home, or even recently in terms of conceding goals. So the fact we just sat so deep and invited so much pressure, it was inevitably going to show. But do you think if we'd been a bit more aggressive and tried to put Arsenal on the back foot a bit more, which we did do for a section of the game, and I do have to grant credit to the team where it's due, for that section just before Myler conceded the goal, we did look quite good and Arsenal were looking quite unsettled. But I just don't understand why we went into our shells, because Flamini ended up at right back. We had Mertesacker and Gabriel injured, so we had, I think it was Chambers and Monreal at centre back. And yet we just didn't seem to put any pressure on them or really question that defence.
Yeah, we didn't look like scoring at all.
And that's the worry, because we haven't for most of our games recently. Well, we've looked like scoring, but we haven't been able to score.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think Diamande has been very impressive at all. So I wasn't really expecting much from him. But so when Bruce brought on Aluko, for example, I thought that was a good substitution. In
I
fairness
thought
to
that was
him,
good. Yeah, I agree.
he came on and you get what you get with Aluko. He does his good things, but he also does his things like why? What is that? But he came on and he at least looked somewhat more positive than everyone else. And although we didn't get any clear-cut chances, he was going forward a little bit.
Yeah.
But again, that was only for 5 or 10 minutes, and then it just stopped, and we just didn't get forward at all, and then we just conceded for fun after that.
There was that passage, I think, where Aluko nutmegged, I can't remember which Arsenal player it was, and got through, and it was sort of a 2-on-2 with Diamande. And he tried to play a through ball to Diamande, but Diamande kind of misread it and ran towards the two Arsenal defenders instead of running into the space where Aluko played the ball, which kind of summed up Diamande's game to me. Logan, what were your thoughts on the players? And we were just chatting about Myler, but Myler and also the rest of the tactical setup, I suppose.
David Myler is, if you've followed Hull over the time since he signed, you know what you get with David Myler. He's always going to get through his work in the middle. He's going to make some crucial tackles for you. And sometimes he will do some brilliant things going forward. I think David Myler is summed up from, I think it was that goal against Sunderland in the cup a couple of years ago when he snatched the ball from Lee Cattermole and ran half the field and then put it away. And that to me is David Myler in a nutshell. So I say this riskily. I don't have too much of a problem when he does slip up and do those back passes in games against Arsenal. Obviously, it's not ideal, but if you're going to have it, then I would much rather it in a big game versus Arsenal rather than a game for promotion type thing. So I think he's probably... Exactly. And I think that's David Myler. I was really disappointed with El Mohammadi. I thought if he was going to push his way back into the team, he really needed a big game against Arsenal. And his delivery looked awful. He just is a shadow of his former self, and it's really sad to see because El Mohammadi was one of my favourite players for a long time, and I just used to love watching him take on defenders and really just have such an impact for us, and that just seems to be missing now. I thought.
Sorry, there you go.
And the star man for me was again Harry Maguire. Always like to see a centre half doing a step over.
His control of the ball, I mean, we chatted about it last time on the podcast as well, but it's just astounding. He looks like such a meaty sort of no-nonsense defender in the same sort of mould as like an Alex Bruce or something, just the way he's built. Mm-hmm. But he's got such finesse with the ball that it's just ridiculous. You mentioned Elmo, and that was the other one that puzzled me because he had such a poor game in the first Arsenal leg. And I thought, surely... Well, my instinct was you start Snodgrass. If you're gonna, instead of Diarmi as the first 11 player that was started, I would have started Snodgrass. But at least you have Snodgrass on the bench. Or, if Elmo's not performing, you bring on Robertson at left back and switch Odebajo over to the right. But that never happened, and Elmo just didn't seem to get into the game at any point. So, yeah, there was a few head scratches in that one. The last point about the game I wanted to make and get your thoughts because I might be one of the few in this, and I've had a few chats this morning with other Hull fans who didn't think the same way. But Bruce's comments before the game about how we needed to show Arsenal respect and Arsene Wenger respect for what he's done in the game, and Arsenal is such a big club and that sort of thing. It's kind of part and parcel with Bruce, where he shows these big clubs a lot of respect, and he says how we've got to respect these clubs because of what they've done, and he says things like, oh, we're Little Hull and we'll always be Little Hull and we're not going to be a big club in the Premier League. And those comments always rub me up the wrong way. And people this morning were saying, oh, what did you expect? It's Arsenal. You can't go toe-to-toe with Arsenal win. But I thought Arsenal hadn't won in 5 games. They'd lost to Swansea the week before last in the Premier League. They were there for the taking. They had injuries, they had issues, and we just didn't go to them. We showed them too much respect. And we say it a lot with our away performances as well. We seem to show sides a lot of respect. Do you see that as an issue with Bruce? Does he do this too much, where he shows these other sides respect and doesn't sort of back our own abilities?
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. When he said, I think you said it last season sometime. We're never going to win the Premier League. We're little old Hull.
Tell that to Leicester.
Look at Leicester right now.
Exactly.
Literally, look at them. They're winning the Premier League. They're going toe to toe, and I think that's what happened today as well. We were so defensively because he showed them too much respect, and we didn't have anything going forward. But if we went forward, if we took the game to them, which we should have because we were at home, then it could have been completely different. But yeah, you're right. He did show them way too much respect.
Logan?
Yeah, I definitely think there's a trend there, and it does get me thinking. If we are to go back up, is Steve Bruce the right man for the Premier League position? I'm not so sure. I definitely think that he's an excellent championship manager, and it would be very very difficult to sack him based on a promotion season. But I just wonder if he has the same spark taking Hull City to the likes of Arsenal or your Chelsea's, as opposed to going to Rotherham on a midweek where he plays without fear and then goes into his shell against the big games.
You're
Definitely
starting to come around, mate. You're starting to come around.
I still think he's definitely the man to take sport for now, but you're right. This morning was definitely a free hit, and I still don't understand the not using Josh Timon. What an opportunity to unleash him at the KC. We're in really a free hit. The only people that were probably expecting us to win were the optimistic Hull fans amongst us.
And that's
everybody else.
That's a good point. I didn't even think of it, that Timon hasn't played at the KC in front of his home fans. That would have been such a moment, even for the last 10 minutes, it would have been such a moment for him.
And it's not like Otabajo is he doesn't really offer a lot on the left because he has to cut back every time. And he did do one good cross for Diame, I think, off his left, but he's not. I think Timon would have been, even though I think Otabajo is probably a better player at the moment, but Timon would have been far better on the left. So I don't understand it.
I do. There was this one moment where Otabajo was very, very good at beating his man, where he kept sort of faking that he was going to do that run up the wing, and he kept trying to, he started to cut back inside and he'd fake up the left, and he finally beat the right back, I think it was Chambers, and got past him, tried to get a cross in, and it was just a hopeless cross, and it sort of sums him up that he just has no left foot. But he tried his hardest, but it was a bit of a cop out. But we'll move on then, and we'll look ahead to our fixtures, and we'll focus on the next 3 games because they're probably pretty big games to look at. And we wanted to chat about a particular selection dilemma that I think, Logan, you mentioned earlier today, and that's the decision of whether to start Powell or Diame. And we haven't mentioned Powell yet, and he had a decent performance against Arsenal, I'd say. I mean, his set-piece delivery was very good. His play around the ground was a bit not so good. But do you think he should be starting against Diame against MK Dons, Logan?
I've got to be honest, I would start him, and only because I don't think that we're yet to see the best of him by any stretch of the imagination. But he just has a presence or a confidence about him when he has the ball at his feet, and it doesn't always pay off. But you can just see in the way that he carries the ball. You sort of pick up with Diame from early on whether he's going to play well or not. He has that presence about him. If Diame's on, you know what you're going to get from him. Probably one of the best players in the championship. But for me, the last couple of games, with the exception of the Ipswich goal, Diame hasn't done enough for me to warrant his spot. So I would be picking Nick Powell.
And one thing that I've kind of found puzzling about Powell, and I don't know if you guys have noticed it, but he seemed like, and it may well be that the role that Bruce gives him when he comes on is just to play wherever the ball is and to chase the ball, but he seems to be all over the pitch at times. I think this morning I noticed he was behind Huddleston for a defensive duty at one point, and he was down at left back at one point to pick up the ball, and sometimes he was up forward with Diamande, but he just seemed to kind of float all over the pitch. Do you think that's Bruce's doing and kind of telling him, just follow the ball, or is that just Powell not really knowing where to go, or what do you think, Mitch?
Well, obviously not having seen a lot of him, but I don't know. I think he's just got a high work rate, to be honest. I just think he has, as Logan said, that confidence and that swagger about him that he just wants to put in 100% and give all that he can. So I don't know. It could be Bruce's tactics, but I don't know. I just think he's got a really high work rate and just wants to put in 100% and leave it all out there.
It's interesting because I mean he was signed as this striker where we were told, oh yes, he can play attacking mid or he can play a striker, but we're signing him as a striker because that's where he plays his best football. But I'm not sure if we've really seen him as a striker yet. So I do think
No.
there's merit to what you're saying, Logan. Playing him instead of Diami in that more forward role might suit him more.
Yeah, indeed. And also, it'd be interesting to see how Diami responds to being dropped when he does get those. If you bring him on the 60th, 70th minute as a swap, what will we see the best out of Diami in that last 20 minutes? I'm not sure. Hopefully.
I agree 100% when you said that you can see how Diame is going to go, like generally at the start of the game. But the thing is, like, if he, as you said, if he's on really well, and him and Hernandez, they had that period together where they were just unstoppable. But when he is off, and I think that could be one of the problems right now. Diame hasn't been his best, and so that's why we're not scoring. So maybe you're right. It is time to put Powell in there instead.
Any other changes that you guys would think to make before MK Dons? I mean, Clucas has been out of form a little bit. Maguire might deserve a call up. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I heard Maloney might have picked up an injury this morning. Is that right?
Yeah, I think he's out for 3 weeks. He's picked up an ankle injury in training, I think.
Yeah, I would love to have seen more of Maloney. A lot of the post-match conferences, or pre-match conferences for that matter, Steve Bruce always talks about how large our squad is and how we're going to need them for the run-in. But the fact of the matter is, when we're playing these back-to-back Tuesday, Wednesday games and then on Saturday, he's not really rotating the squad. And for me, that he doesn't need to go and make 11 drastic changes like he would for a cup tie. But it does get me thinking that if he's talking about freshening up the squad, throw a few changes in there that maybe we don't expect and that other teams aren't going to expect, and really get the best out of your squad as a fresh unit, I guess.
And to raise a cheeky thought, if we had beaten Arsenal this morning and we were playing Watford on the weekend, the odds of us playing Hernandez, Snodgrass, Clucas, etc. would be drastically lower than they would be if we're playing MK Dons. So I don't know how players' fitness levels vary depending on what competition they're expected to play in, but I guess that's another point about how seriously we take the cup. I don't like using the phrase must win, but is the game against MK Dons approaching that? I mean, you were saying earlier, Logan,
100%.
if we drop any more points, we're really kind of playing pretty hard catch up. Do we need to beat MK Dons? Is it win or bust?
I think that it's definitely a must-win, but I think that perhaps the most imperative game is going to be the Middlesbrough game, and it's a must-not-lose. I think we could probably sneak a point against MK Dons, who we should go out and beat, but if we don't lose that game to Borough, I think that'll keep us in the race, regardless of what happens with the MK Dons result.
What are your thoughts, Mitch?
Yeah, I think we need to beat MK Dons. I don't think their form not been super impressive.
No, I don't think they've been great lately.
Yeah, well, and at the KC, correct?
Yeah, it's at home. So I think we've got MK
Definitely.
Dons and then Forest both at home, and then we're away to Middlesbrough.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I definitely think we need to beat MK Dons. Anything but 3 points, I'll be very disappointed. And I know there's still a fair few games left, but for example, if Burnley played MK Dons at home right now, they would beat them. If maybe not Middlesbrough, they've been a bit iffy, but Burnley, just for example, they would undoubtedly beat MK Dons.
Well,
at
yeah.
home, so
In saying that, I've just had a look. In their last few fixtures, MK Dons have drawn with Middlesbrough, beaten Derby, lost to Bristol City, drawn with Huddersfield, lost to Blackburn, beaten QPR, and drawn with Charlton. So the Charlton game is this morning. So it's kind of a bit up and down with their form. I mean, Blackburn have been looking quite good, so that result's not too bad. And they beat QPR on the weekend. So they haven't been terrible by any means, but yeah, you'd still think we'd be putting them away.
at home.
At home especially, yeah. Logan, you raised the point about Bruce and not really rotating the players, and I found it really interesting because I think it was the Brighton game where he said afterwards that he'd been tempted to leave the side unchanged from the previous game against Burnley, I think it was, and that he realised that was a mistake. And yet it was quite interesting that he did the same thing the following week when we played, I think it was Sheffield Wednesday midweek. and he made no changes. And as you say, we've got this deep squad, but we're just not really using them. Guys like Elmo aren't really getting a run in the side. Guys like Hayden have just kind of dropped off the face of the earth. We've got Forest midweek, which is another game. I think it's one of our games in hand over Burnley, I believe. Which, when we get into these games in hand, we really do need to be winning them because, as you say, points are better than games in hand because games in hand aren't, a sure thing. Is this another must-win game?
Certainly. I would not take anything less than 3 points. I think we've got to take the 6. We've got to beat MK Dons. We have to beat Forest. And that will make the table look much more respectable and hopefully take some pressure off going into that Borough game. Yeah. I think if we were to lose one of those or to draw one, we would need to then go beat Middlesbrough on their patch. And with our current form, it would be difficult to see that happening. In saying that, they're not playing too well either. So to make a very interesting game.
Well, we'll be heading into Cheers for that one because it's televised as a Saturday morning game, and that's Saturday week. So I'll post stuff in the group in the lead up to let everyone know. But hopefully we get a bit of a crowd there because that could be one of the games of the season. I think it could be quite interesting because Middlesbrough are hardly going to park the bus against us at home because 3 points for them means as much, if not more, than 3 points for us because both sides will be wanting to create a bit of a gap with the other. So how do you see it, Mitch? Do you think we can get a result against Borough, or should we kind of settle for a draw, I suppose?
Well, they've not been overly impressive lately, and I know they've got a pretty good or very good defensive record at home, but they obviously lost to Rotherham this morning, and they lost to Blackburn a couple of matches ago, and they had a few draws leading in Lindy just before that. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see Bruce's tactics, whether he goes out to attack or whether he goes out to not lose. But I think we can take all 3 points there, and I think it'll be a massive 3 points if we can do so.
How do you see it, Logan?
Yeah, I'm quietly confident of taking 3 points, and I really do hope that Bruce does go to the Riverside and does attack them because I feel like if we were to nick 3 points there, that could be the nail in the coffin as far as Borough's run's concerned. If they were to lose that psychologically, I think that would probably put them away. If we were to lose that, you would still probably fancy our chances just because of the amount of home games we've got remaining. And I think there's still a fear factor from other teams visiting the KC.
And it will be interesting to see how the rest of the season pans out because obviously there's Burnley, Borough and us fighting for the automatic spots, but there's another B team that we haven't really talked about yet, which is Brighton. And they've really sort of fought back into a bit of form, and they're not too far off the automatic spots either. So do either of you rate Brighton as much of a chance to make the automatic spots?
Well, here you go.
There's definitely something about Brighton that they just won't go away. You look at them on paper and they certainly don't have a fear factor that Borough and Burnley do. But in saying that, we're 36 rounds in, they are, and they're sitting above us as it stands tonight. So, I mean, you never write them off. They certainly seem like an unlikely opponent, and I would be incredibly surprised if they did sneak one of the automatic spots in particular. But hey, they're there or thereabouts.
Yeah, I agree. Well, when they went 20 games undefeated at the start of the season, I think everyone was kind of waiting for them to drop off. We all knew it would come, and they did to a degree. But now they've come back into it, and I don't know what to take of them if they're genuine or not. Because as Logan said, they don't have the strongest squad, but they are up there, and so I think we do have to take them pretty seriously at the moment, considering they are above us. I don't think they'll finish above us, but we'll see.
Tell you what, I wouldn't want to face them in the playoff final because I think they're just about the only opponent, other than maybe Sheffield Wednesday, that I'd probably be quite worried about in a playoff final. I think on paper and form over the season, we've been pretty good against the bigger clubs when they've come to play and when they've come to attack us. Like you look at Burnley and Borough when they came to the KC. So in the playoffs, if we did have to go through the playoffs, I'd probably back us over the two legs of the semi-finals and then probably on our day at Wembley. But Yeah, I'd much rather go up in the automatic spots. Are Burnley looking like they've almost stitched up? Well, not almost stitched up the title, because I mean we can close to a point, but they're certainly looking very good and very likely for that first spot.
I'm pretty convinced that Burnley are up. If I'm being honest, there's still a long way to go, and there's many twists and turns. They could certainly drop 1 or 2 games and be looking over their shoulder. But I just think with the way Sean Dyche has them playing, I just worry they're just always tough to beat, no matter where they go. They're very honest side, and yeah, I'd fancy them for champions at the moment.
They did fall behind to Fulham this morning, so I mean, and there was the Bolton game recently as well. So it's frustrating because these sides are, conceding leads and they're looking fragile at times during games, as we've seen happen with Derby and Borough as well. But then Burnley can just somehow pull out the results still, which is frustrating. Andre Gray with, I think, is it 21 or 22 goals now? Wouldn't mind having him in the side.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about that. I still think that I'd prefer Hernandez from the start of the year. I do rate Gray, but I think it's the
I think
you've got Gray.
If we'd signed Gray, I think the issue with Gray was Jelavic leaving quick enough so that we could shift his wages. So I think if Jelavic had left earlier, we could have had Gray and Hernandez.
Yeah. I think the difference between with Burnley at the moment is they've got Vogue scoring quite regularly as well, assisting Andre. So if they do fall behind, you back both of them in the goal scoring form they're in. Whereas we are, as we know, very heavy dependent on Hernandez. If he doesn't score, sometimes we don't score.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see Burnley probably already up, Mitch?
Probably at the moment. Just looking at their fixtures, they do still have a couple of tough ones. They've got Brighton away. They've got Middlesbrough at home. I think Preston have been extremely impressive lately, and they've got to go to Preston to play them. So,
I'm very glad that we've already played Preston twice.
Yeah, very.
They're being very handy in taking points off our rivals.
Yeah. Thank you very much. But they've got teams like Leeds, and no one's going to lose to Leeds at home except us.
Borough drew with Leeds, so there's still hope.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think they're up. I think with the ref giving them penalties nearly week in, week out, it's helping as well.
Would be nice if Gray took them more often for my bets. But there we go. And the other one obviously is Borough, who we've talked about a bit already, but they're throwing away a lot of points lately, and they're kind of almost doing their best to give us the automatic spot.
Who loses to Rotherham?
Well, we did.
Oh yeah, that's true.
But yeah, I mean, I think if we want to talk about our poor form lately, I think the main positive to take out of it is that it's been against sides in the top 10, whereas you look at Borough and they're losing games or dropping points to sides much lower down the table, and we're still playing quite well if we can't score, but we're creating a lot of chances. But as we've said, I mean, we've really got to be taking 6 points at least from our next 3 games.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll probably leave it there, boys. So thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you everyone for listening in. It's been a bit of a less uplifting podcast than last time. We haven't had too many wins to discuss, but hopefully when we come back after these next 3 games, we'll have a few more wins to chat about, and we'll hopefully be back in the automatic spots. But until then, hopefully see you guys posting in the group, or see you tweeting us on Twitter. And until next time, hopefully Hull keeps winning. Bye. You've been listening to the official Hull City Australia podcast. For more discussion, join us on Facebook in the Hull City AFC Australian Supporters Group, or follow us on Twitter at Hull City AFC Oz. The music was created by Amber and Black.
With a burning desire, tigers are roaring and destiny's calling, 'cause now is the time, yeah.